This is meteorologist Ryan Weekman on what is an active May 11th with our weekly Sunday night weather hangout. Thank you to everybody who's joining in. I know if you've been following me on Facebook and Twitter and Google Plus for this evening, you know just how busy things have been for us, tracking lots of thunderstorms across the Midwest and Tornado Alley this evening. Certainly, if you think about May, that's the month that you would think for severe weather, and it's certainly underway across a good portion of the country for us. Here again, this Sunday night weather hangout thing is relatively new, so if you're just joining in for the first time, here's kind of how things will work. First, I'll go over some of the forecast things that I'm looking at, some of the details that I can't get into during a 2 to 3 minute weathercast on air. We'll get into a little bit of the geekier and nerdier side of the forecast, and then we'll also answer some of your questions that you've been submitting through the evening over on my Twitter and Facebook pages. For those of you who don't have the link to those, look up above if you're watching on the Storm Track Weather blog, because you'll see the links to it there. Of course, I'm hosting this Sunday night weather hangout on Google+, so if you need a link to that as well on the Storm Track Weather blog, there's the link right above here for you. As you watch on Google+, one of the really cool features is not only are we able to stream this live, but it gives you a chance to ask questions live as well if you're on Google+. And I'll be getting to some of those questions later. Otherwise, I've got a predetermined list alongside my forecast right here of some of the questions that were asked earlier this evening from Doug, Sarah, and Jeff, just to name a few of them. I'll be getting to some of those questions here in a little bit for us. But first, let's get to that forecast side of things, because it does look like the next 48 to 72 hours will be rather active across the area. Maybe not in terms of a severe weather outbreak, but there are some chances for some strong storms across the viewing area here the next few days, especially when you look off to the west and what's going on. So I'm going to flip the screen around, and I'm going to show you guys what I've been looking at in the Storm Track Weather Center as far as storm chances go for the next 24 hours. I've got to say they look better, or the chances look higher than what they have over the last 24 to 48 hours. Here's the very latest. This is our Simu-AWIP software. Again, this is just free software that anybody can find online. And this is a loop radar of what's going on across northern Indiana right now. Still have some scattered showers across the far southern half of our viewing area, but what will probably draw your attention is what's going on over towards Chicago this evening. Some very hefty thunderstorms there. In fact, Gary, Indiana just reported a 78-mile-per-hour wind gust as these storms came on through. A lot of that has to do with there was better instability. The atmosphere was more unstable back towards Chicago, and the storm was kind of coming off the lake, so it kind of combined and gave the opportunity for that storm to be really strong there. I'm not expecting severe weather, or in any stretch of the imagination, widespread severe weather across our neck of the woods for tonight. But we have to watch this complex of storms near Gary, Indiana, Valparaiso, down towards Kankakee, Illinois. And then look at what's lifting north here. This is right along the warm front. Danville, Indiana, Indianapolis, Lafayette. Of course, that's where Purdue's at. Watch these storms that are lifting north. So there's a pretty solid chance we're going to be looking at showers and thunderstorms overnight for tonight. But the severe potential at this point looks pretty low for us. I'm going to zoom things out. Here's the national side of things. Very, very, very busy as far as what's going on here. Now, of course, here's the thunderstorms back towards Chicago. Watch these storms across Nebraska and Kansas explode this evening. Incredibly intense storms. Absolutely vicious supercells in southeastern Nebraska, now getting ready to push into parts of Omaha and far western Iowa. And on the backside of this system, you see the returns across Colorado, extreme western Nebraska up into South Dakota and Wyoming. They're reporting snow in parts of Colorado and Wyoming, just to show how dynamic and how far-reaching that the storm system is. There's two sides of the system, and it's really not as unusual as what you'd think for Denver to be getting snow during the mid part of May. It doesn't necessarily mean that they like it any, but it's not as incredibly unusual as what you would think. Actually, April tends to be their heaviest snow month of the year, so they're not far off of that. But the big players tonight are the severe weather across Nebraska, Kansas, and then also some pretty decent storms in Chicago. And right along that warm front, I'll tell you this over and over again. If you guys watch any of our newscasts, and I'll be giving a forecast, and I'll say it's all about the gradients from the warm air to the cold air. If you divide that right in half, that's where we tend to get our most active weather, and tonight is a perfect prime example of that. It's just like when you're in elementary school and you were all taught in primary school. The collision of the air masses from the cold air to the warm air, it helps collide, create that lift, and that's what creates those thunderstorms out there. And tonight, we're certainly seeing that for us, especially when you look at the radar, not only on a national scale where that warm and cold air is colliding over Nebraska and Kansas, but also zoom it back in and where the warm and moist air to the south down towards Indianapolis, it was even warmer and more unstable down there than what we saw across northwest Ohio and across northern Indiana. So that's why I'm seeing more thunderstorms developing there across central Indiana. And again, severe threat right now does not look very high for our viewing area, but the atmosphere has been so churned up across a good portion of the country. And this is a very strong storm system that I can't rule out an isolated wind gust tonight, maybe some hail. We saw that last week with the atmosphere the way that it is, and it's not out of the question again that we'll see some heavy rain and definitely some thunder and lightning for us here. Speaking of lightning, if you guys didn't get a chance to see that lightning picture out of Tip City, Ohio, Twitter and Facebook on my pages right there. Go ahead and look at it there. Lightning struck a tree and literally debarked the tree and spread the bark out in all directions for us. So incredibly interesting to look at for us there. Those of you that have been tuning in just within the last few moments over there on Google+, I'm noticing you guys asking some questions on the side here. I'm going to try to get to all of those questions here coming up in just a little bit. So if you guys have a question about severe weather, what are our potentials, a funny cloud that you've seen recently, anything to do with the weather, it doesn't have to be just with the forecast. Ask your question, and I'll try to get to as many as I can here. This program, again, our Sunday night weather hangout, we try to make it around 20 to 30 minutes long. This is something that we do on a weekly basis, but it's something I'm trying to do to get us geared up for severe weather season, and I can do more of these hangouts and answer more of your questions if there is a more pressing severe weather event looming close in the forecast for us. So these are kind of warm-ups for us, and it's a good way, of course, to interact and get your questions answered as well. So if you're on Google Plus right now, ask those questions. If you're watching and you're following me on Twitter as well, ask your questions in there. I've got my live feed on one of my other computers over here in the Weather Center. If you guys have never seen the Weather Center, it's kind of messy right now. I apologize for that. There's our coffee maker. This is what Chris Vickers uses in the morning, and all the morning crew. They need that. But I've got my other computer hooked up over there, and that's what I'm using to look through some questions and try to get to those as well. But the most effective way is on Google+. All right, let's get back to the forecast. As you can see, I get sidetracked sometimes when I'm doing these forecasts on here. It's just fun and kind of go off on my little tangents. Here's the very latest radar. Again, storms lifting north. Here's another way to look at these storms on a national scale, and this is a fascinating way for it to look at how rapid that some of these storms have developed for this evening. I'm going to try and loop this if our computer will. There we go. Basically, the way to look at this, you're actually looking at cloud top temperatures. So anywhere where you see this blue, generally, and black, it means there are no clouds. Anywhere that you see the green, those are low clouds. Anywhere you see red, those are mid-level clouds. And the white are the really high-level clouds. So anywhere where you see this across, as you expect, Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, back towards Chicago, that's where we're seeing strong and severe thunderstorms. And what's amazing about technology and severe weather forecasting nowadays, as I'm going to keep this looping for you, it's just the last 6 hours or so, but watch over Nebraska and Kansas for several hours. There were no storms. There was nothing there. There weren't even clouds hardly in the sky. And then almost at the snap of a finger, how fast those thunderstorms go. It's incredibly violent how these storms do develop. And so it's something that, with the technology that we have nowadays, it is fascinating to watch as those storms do develop. Of course, they have a lot of destruction along with them. But when you look at it from space like this, technology nowadays with severe weather is just truly amazing for us here. A big forcing feature for this is actually the jet stream. And this is what we're looking at right now. The strongest winds are coming out of the four corners, and this is what provides the lift. And you notice where those strong winds in the purple and red shades right here are pointing into Nebraska and Kansas. Well, that's what's helping fuel those storms for you there. And while we're still looking at strong storms in Chicago and extreme northeast Indiana, you'll notice the jet stream is displaced well off to the west, and so that's why they're dealing with more of those types of storms. So I know what the big question is, and a lot of people are probably asking, okay, we know there's storms to the west. When are those storms going to be coming our way, and when's the highest threat for severe weather? And that's one of the questions that was asked tonight already. Jeff was asking, when's the best threat for severe weather? When's the highest threat for severe weather? So let's kind of kill two birds with one stone here. I'm going to talk about when we're expecting rainfall to move in, when higher chances for rainfall are, and then when those higher chances for severe weather are. So let's flip things back to my screen, show you what I'm looking at as far as the future of the radar here. I have to zoom back. This is the NAM forecast model. This gives a pretty good idea of what you should be looking at as far as storms. There's the stuff across Nebraska and Kansas. Here's the stuff back towards Chicago and over our viewing area right now. Overnight tonight, it tries to weaken a lot of the storms for us, but over the next 2 to 3 hours, I do expect that those storms will be marching our way, and I do expect showers and thunderstorms overnight for tonight. And again, it's not out of the question. Some of those storms may be just strong enough to produce signatures on radar that the National Weather Service will issue severe thunderstorm warnings with it, mainly for hail. So keep that in mind for tonight. Of course, we're going to be here. We're going to be watching everything for you guys. The best chance for rain, I don't think, is going to be on Monday. While there will be a chance for some scattered showers and thunderstorms, especially it all depends on how things play out for this evening. How those thunderstorms, how long they last for tonight, and exactly where they stall out and dissipate for this evening. Because again, it's all about the collision of air masses. And if we can get one of those thunderstorms to last a long time overnight for tonight into the morning hours for tomorrow, it'll lay down what we call an outflow boundary. Think about this. When you have a heavy thunderstorm, before that rain gets to you, many times you've felt this over the summer months, you feel that cool rush of air hit you in the face. Well, that's what we call an outflow boundary, and that can be something that we really have to watch. It almost acts like a mini cold front, and it can be just enough when the atmosphere is very close to being unstable enough for thunderstorms. It can be just that little bit to push the atmosphere over the edge and create those thunderstorms. So tomorrow's one of those cases where it looks like there may not be a strong trigger for thunderstorms. There's not a cold front coming through. There's not a warm front coming through. There's not an area of low pressure coming through the Great Lakes. But there may be just enough left over from the thunderstorms tonight to create some scattered showers and thunderstorms for tomorrow. And the atmosphere is unstable enough, or potentially unstable enough, that we could see some strong to severe thunderstorms for tomorrow. So that's something that we want to watch, especially during the afternoon hours for tomorrow. But the higher chance for heavier rain, as I put this further into motion, this is Tuesday afternoon. This is when the cold front will be coming through, and you can see how well defined it is from the northern tip of lower Michigan back through South Bend and back through Paducah and, of course, south and down into Texas. And my goodness, do they need the rain down in Texas and Oklahoma. This will be fantastic news for those southern states to see some heavy showers. For us, the cold front comes on through, I do believe, Tuesday afternoon. And if we can get enough sunshine during the afternoon hours before these storms are able to develop and push in, Tuesday afternoon could be another day where we deal with some straight line wind threat, maybe some storms 50 to 60 mile per hour wind gusts. Again, that depends on getting enough sunlight in for us here. Tuesday. So the next few days, there's not necessarily a day where we're looking at an incredibly high chance for severe weather, but we're kind of on that borderline where if everything works out just right, we could see some storms that could produce some strong wind gusts and some hail as well for us here. I'm going to close this guy. That's just a warning box that pops up when the radar indicates something for us. And again, heavy rain chances. When you look at our 7-day forecast, you'll notice there's lots of rain in it, especially as we get Wednesday and into Thursday. In fact, I'm going to do this. If you guys don't use Google a lot, I'm addicted to it. And it makes life easy, especially when I'm doing one of these Hangouts, because then I can just do this and show you what our 7-day forecast looks like. There's that chance for rain. We'll probably have to update this for Monday. We'll probably have to up this a little bit for chances for rain on Monday. I'll probably put it to 40% for the evening shows for tonight. But Tuesday, there's a solid chance for rain. Wednesday, there might be a little bit of a lull, but Thursday, I think there's another solid chance for rain that'll move in on Thursday as well. So look at the temperatures as they cool off. Remember that intense collision of air masses that I was talking about further off to the west, where they're dealing with those severe thunderstorms across the central plains this evening, and they're dealing with snow back to the west of that. Well, you know, if they're dealing with snow west, there's some cold air involved with it. So highs are definitely going to take a plunge as we get later on into the week. back down into the low 60s. So while tomorrow does look like another warm day, it looks like later on into the week things will be cooling down for us there. As you see, highs well into the or only into the 60s, and then things will be drying out as we get into the weekend for us. So as we go into next week, just to give you like a 7 to 10 day outlook, it does look like things will be warming up for us here. Again, I've got a few questions right here that I have written down. I'm going to try to get to some of these. Jay Bloom has a question. It looks like a few people have liked that one, so I'm going to try to get to that question here in a little bit. Zach, Christina, and Christopher and Tony, I see you guys have all asked questions as well, so I'm going to try to get to those questions after I get to these ones right here. So hang with us. And again, if you're watching right now, you're watching on Google+, or if you're watching on the Storm Track Weather blog, there's a link up to there to my Google+ account. You can go on there if you're not signed up. It only takes a few seconds, especially if you have a Gmail account. And that's a way to be incredibly interactive during these Sunday night weather talks for us. And we'll go down the line and we'll get to some of these questions for us here. So, Jeff, to answer your question, I know I kind of went around and about as far as what the best chance for severe weather is. Each of the next few days, there is the chance for some severe weather. But again, it's kind of that marginal severe weather that we'll have to see how things exactly play out for us. As far as one day that we're like, this is the day, this is going to be it, this is something we've been looking at, there's not one of those days on the near-term horizon right now for us. Doug had a good question for us here, and this is something that we've dealt with all through the spring. Doug asked over on my Facebook page, he asked, why are we seeing in spring such temperature fluctuations for us? And a big part of this goes back to, if you've been watching these these Sunday night weather hangouts, it goes back to the lake temperatures. Right now, thanks to the sunny skies we had this weekend, temperatures into the 80s, we're really starting to warm up Lake Erie. We're really starting to negate the effects of the cooler lake waters, but nevertheless, they are still below average. In fact, I can show you what the lake temperatures are if I can flip the screen back around for you guys here. The western basin of Lake Erie, over here by Toledo, to give you some perspective, the islands are about right here, if you can see that on my on the screen. The temperature off of Toledo, Lake Erie, is already up to 56 degrees, so that's very healthy. Still below average, but it's starting to warm up rather rapidly. Where the ice stayed around longer and where the deeper sections of the lake are, it's slower to respond to the season, so it's going to be much cooler over here in the eastern part of the lake. In fact, there's a huge pocket of lake water temperatures where it's only 38 degrees. So when we do our forecasts and we look at the wind direction this time of year, you have to look at the wind direction. And anytime last few weeks we have a northeast wind, well, the lake has really cooled us down. And typically when we have a strong northeast wind, it means that there's a storm system coming in. So think about this. We have clouds overhead. That slows down. The heating for the sun because you have the clouds. That usually means with the storm system coming in, we have at least a chance for rain, or it is raining. That cools us down. And we have the lake water temperatures that are below average and cold that our wind is coming off of. So it's three things that are really working against the season trying to warm up. But then you may get a day the next afternoon where winds turn southerly. The skies clear up, and man, do things warm up. So it's not unusual this time of year for us to get those 30 to 40 degree temperature fluctuations. It all depends on the wind direction and if there's a storm system coming in. So Doug, I hope that answers your question there for you. Sarah had a really fun question for us here, and I want to make sure that I say this one right. I'm going to sneak over here to my Facebook page because she had a really interesting question. She was asking about clouds moving different directions at different layers. She mentioned that clouds near the surface, here we go. She lives down in Putnam County, and this morning you saw clouds moving to the east under clouds that were moving to the west. Are kind of interesting, one way or another. So her question was, how does that happen? Well, it's actually incredibly common. It all depends on your perspective if you're able to view that happening. It's very common. In fact, every day of every year that we have clouds overhead, except for those days where we literally don't have any clouds because it's blue skies, the clouds are moving at different directions. And it all has to do with different layers of the atmosphere. Here near the surface, we tend to be more under the effect of friction. We tend to be more under the effect of the Coriolis force and areas of low pressure. Higher in the atmosphere, when you get away from a lot of those effects, or they're not as strong, the jet streams tends to take over, and that is typically moving from west to east. So a lot of those high-level clouds will typically move in that direction. So it all depends on how the atmosphere is flowing. In fact, why don't I bring this up for you here? And again, you guys will have to excuse me. I'm doing some of these things on the fly, and sometimes it makes it more fun, but sometimes it stalls out the fluidity, if you will, of these Storm Track weather talks, these Sunday night weather hangouts. But here's a fun way to look at it, and I'll do one of these screencasts so you guys can look at this. Here's something that I look at, and I want you just to look at this screen for a few moments and look at the different motions in the atmosphere and how, if you're in one location, you can notice clouds moving one direction. If you're in another location, the clouds are moving in a different direction. Like, look at this area of low pressure across the four corners. If you were to the east of that area of low pressure, the clouds would be coming out of the south and west. If you lived to the west of that low pressure, let's say in Nevada and Utah, the clouds would actually be coming to the north from the north. And as that low pressure center moves, well, your cloud direction will be changing. And that has to do with the upper and lower decks of the clouds. And it has a good thing to do, or a strong indication sometimes, of what the severe potential is. A lot of times you'll be saying, we'll be on the air and say, this is one of those days where the atmosphere is really unstable here, and there's already a lot of turning in the atmosphere. There's already a lot of rotation in those clouds out there, and all we need is a storm to develop, and there's the potential for tornadoes or spin-ups or something like that. You may hear us say those things, and that's what we're talking about, and that's why they saw tornadoes across Nebraska for today, because there was a lot of that turning in the atmosphere that was already in place, and it makes it easier for those storms to ingest that turning motion and subsequently quickly develop tornadoes as well. So on normal days like today, you'll notice some clouds moving one way, another cloud moving another way, and it doesn't really mean a whole lot, but on severe weather days, that's certainly something that we will keep in mind. That's very observant, Sarah, of you, and something really cool. I still find myself as a meteorologist. I love this. I grew up in Northwest Ohio, went away to Illinois for schooling. I've been able and fortunate enough to come back. And no matter where I've been, Illinois or Ohio, I still catch myself looking out at the clouds. And that's probably the most fun part of my job, is even when there's not really much going on in the atmosphere, it's not one of those active weather days, it's still cool to look up at those clouds and notice those sorts of things. So, Sarah, that's really good that you're keeping an eye on those sorts of things. Really fun for you. All right, let's get to these questions that have been posted on Google Plus for us here. Again, I got the questions done that were posted on Twitter and Facebook to the best that I could for you. Let's get to these ones here. And Jay Bloom, I apologize, I don't know what your full name is, but we'll just call you Jay Bloom because that's what's showing up for us here. The question is, what are the summer temperatures looking like at this point, June to August? Does it look like we'll have temps in the upper 80s, 90s, or more 70s and 80s? At this point, it's very difficult to tell, but I would have to say this summer is probably going to be pretty close to normal. Maybe a few degrees cooler than normal, but I think we'll still have days in the 90s and plenty of days in the 80s. So I don't necessarily think this is going to be a below average summer like we had a couple of years ago where it was a frigidly cold summer. It seemed like we never really warmed up. I think we'll be able to warm up here, and the last few days should be a strong indication of that. So, Jay Bloom, I hope that answers your question for you here. Let's get to the next one for us here. Oh, this is a fun one. I already saw the word Farmer's Almanac here. Christina, what are your views on the Farmer's Almanac? How close is the weather prediction when using it? Well, I don't look at the Farmer's Almanac very often. Usually it's more for amusement purposes, Christina, that I look at it. And there is some value, especially with the astronomy that the Farmer's Almanac has. It's great with the lunar phases, and it does have some interesting features to it. But as far as actually predicting the weather, a lot of it has to do with climatology. You'll see a lot of very vague words in the Farmer's Almanac. This winter leading into it, I believe it said snowy and cold, which accurately described this winter, but it accurately describes 9 winters out of 10. So the Farmer's Almanac's fun to use, but I certainly don't use it as gospel here. We have much more sophisticated and accurate tools that we use here in the Weather Center. So, Christina, thanks for the question. I hope that answers that one for you. Tony asking this question, what would be your take on the tornado threat the next few days? Not much, if any. Tony, that's pretty much right. Just because there is a warm front in the Great Lakes, you never want to say it's completely out of the question. If there was to be a day where I might be looking at the potential for some weak spin-ups higher than any others of the next 7 days, it would probably be tomorrow. But I'm still not all that it doesn't look all that interesting as far as a significant tornado threat. Everything would have to play out exactly right, and I just don't foresee things like that happening. I don't think the atmosphere quite has enough oomph in it the next few days for that. Okay, Christopher asking, I have a track meet, I assume, in Napoleon at 9 a.m. Is it going to rain? Christopher, I think the rain will be over by then, but there is a chance we could still have a few scattered showers. So keep that in mind. I would plan on it being dry, but you might want to be prepared just in case for you there, okay? And Zach, the last question, last but not least, I promise. What is the outlook for rain this week? Are we going to see a lot of rain this year? Zach, we've already been well above average as far as precipitation for the year. As far as rain for the week goes, here's some of the rainfall totals that the National Weather Service is kind of predicting over the next 3 days. And it basically puts us in a shade of around 1 to 1.5 inches of rain. So we'll get some solid rain the next few days, just as you'd expect things to be for the spring week that we have ahead for us here, especially with that low pressure moving into the Great Lakes the next few days for us. Guys, that was one of our longer Sunday night weather hangouts that we've had. I still see I have a couple of viewers that are hanging on for us here. I certainly appreciate you guys watching. If you have any suggestions for some new ways or new features you'd like of our Sunday night weather hangouts, we're going to try and have some more fun. I think we might have an extra special treat next week. I've been hinting at this one for several weeks, but I think we're going to do our behind-the-scenes tour during a newscast next week. So we're going to keep the cameras on. We're going to do our regular Sunday night weather hangout, and then we're going to have another Google Plus hangout, and I'm going to take you guys behind the scenes here. The studio that you see here. And I'm going to take you while I'm on the air. Tim Miller's on the air. Jordan Strack will be in as well, and we'll be live behind the scenes. It'll be totally neat and totally cool for you. So we'll be doing that soon. As always, if you're watching on the Storm Track Weather blog up there, like the Facebook and Twitter pages, we'll be providing information. If there is a severe weather threat that presents itself, of course, we'll do another hangout here, and we're always online and always will be on TV if there are any warnings issued. So you guys can count on us, and I certainly appreciate you guys watching. We're going to do this again next week at 8:30 again, so mark your calendars, and thank you guys very much for watching. Have a great week.